It was one of those muggy July Sundays in Vermont where the humidity makes the air feel like it's carrying a burden. Like every inhale pulls a little heavier. The kind of day where even standing still leaves you damp. We'd driven up to Emily's family lake house in Camden for her mom's 70th birthday. She called it a major milestone, which meant matching t-shirts for the cousins, a folding table laden with salads nobody really touched, and an inflatable unicorn float tethered near the dock that the kids kept tumbling off of. There was a Bluetooth speaker cycling through the same playlist, Fleetwood Mac, a few indie tracks Emily's sister swore by, and the aroma of grilling meat wafting across the water like some kind of savory mist. The lake was stunning in that Pinterest board kind of way, calm and glassy, framed by towering pines and old wealth. The kind of place where boats have names painted on their sterns and neighbors wave with 2 fingers, just enough to be courteous. I used to adore it there. That house held 100 of Emily's childhood memories, her dad's old canoe suspended upside down from the boathouse rafters, the spot where she fractured her arm trying to impress on a rope swing, the hammock she'd read in every summer until dusk. She'd share these stories with this gentle, wistful smile, like she wanted me to experience them, too. But this time felt off. I hadn't wanted to come. That sounds awful, I know, selfish, maybe even childish. But all week leading up to it, I kept feeling this slow, creeping unease in my chest. Something had shifted between us, though I couldn't put it into words. There was a gap widening, not a loud, shouting kind of gap, but the subtler kind. The kind that creeps in when someone stops reaching for your hand, stops sharing their day before you even ask. I told myself I was overthinking, that I was exhausted, that work had been draining, but deep down, I knew. Still, I came because when you love someone, truly love them, you show up even when it stings a little. Even when you're not sure they do the same for you anymore. The second we arrived, I felt it, that sense of being the spare piece in a puzzle that already fit together. Her family was boisterous and vibrant, deeply attuned to each other's rhythms. Everyone knew which cooler held the hard seltzer, who despised mayo in their coleslaw, which cousin had split with their girlfriend again. I found myself on the fringes, smiling too much, nodding along like I was part of the decor. At one point, I got trapped by her cousin Ethan, who launched into a long-winded rant about fishing licenses and how the new rules were a damn scam. I nodded through it, feigning interest, counting the seconds. When someone shouted that the drinks table was out of ice, I shot my hand up like I was in school. "I'll get it," I said, already heading inside. I think I just wanted a moment alone. Or maybe I just wanted to feel useful. Inside the house, the temperature dipped just enough to make the sweat on my back feel clammy. The kitchen smelled like fresh mint and raspberries, the kind of scent that fools your brain into thinking you're at ease, even when you're not. Emily and her sisters, Lauren and Tessa, were perched on bar stools like a scene from a glossy magazine. All tan legs and sundresses, sipping sparkling cocktails from mason jars. They were laughing at something on Tessa's phone, the kind of deep, unguarded laughter that makes you feel like an intruder just for walking in. I didn't even make it to the freezer before I heard Emily say it. "God, he's just so steady, you know," she said, her voice light, amused, like vanilla ice cream. "No shocks. Not in a bad way, I guess, just reliable." The word struck me square in the chest. They laughed, not cruelly, but like it was just a casual observation, something said without weight, offhand, careless. But I felt it like a pin to a balloon I didn't know was still inflated. She wasn't talking about Ethan or some college ex. She was talking about me, not in some dramatic, venomous way that might have been easier. It was the fact that it was so nonchalant, like it was just an accepted truth, like she assumed everyone already knew, like it was fine to say it out loud because it had already been settled. I stood there, half in the room, half in my own head, clutching the ice bag like it was the only thing anchoring me to the moment. I waited for her to backtrack, to soften it somehow, make a joke of it, toss in a "but he's my steady" or something, but she didn't. She just kept sipping her drink and laughing with her sisters, completely unaware that something had shattered inside me. I left the room quietly, didn't say a word, dropped the ice bag on the patio table nearest the drinks cooler, and went back to pretending I belonged there. But from that moment on, nothing felt quite real anymore. I sat near the grill, watching smoke curl in lazy spirals into the sky, and felt like I was observing someone else's life. Emily came out a few minutes later, barefoot and radiant, her laugh trailing behind her like a melody. She kissed her mom's cheek, snatched a chip off someone's plate, made everyone around her smile. She didn't even glance at me, like I wasn't part of the picture anymore. And the worst part? I wasn't surprised. I didn't say anything to her the rest of the afternoon. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I genuinely didn't know what I'd say if I opened my mouth. I just kept replaying her words in my head like a broken record on loop. Steady, reliable, vanilla, not in a bad way. I sat through burgers and beers and uncles retelling the same stories I'd heard at every family gathering for the last 5 years. I smiled when people looked my way. I helped Emily's dad carry chairs down to the fire pit. I even laughed at a joke I didn't hear because I was too busy spiraling quietly inside myself. Emily, she floated. She was in her element, barefoot in the grass, hair up in a messy bun, stealing sips from her sister's wine, telling stories with hand gestures so big they made the kids giggle. People lit up around her. It was one of the things I loved about her, honestly. Still do, if I'm being real. But that night, watching it felt different because she didn't light up around me anymore. She brushed past me once, heading for the cooler, her hand grazing my back like I was a lamp she had to navigate around. No eye contact, no private smile, just nothing. The whole time, I kept waiting for her to circle back, to say, "Hey, earlier I didn't mean it like that," or to laugh and say, "You know I was joking, right?" Something, anything. But she didn't. If she even remembered what she said, it didn't seem important enough for her to revisit. And that's when it really hit me. She didn't see it the way I did, not the words, not the moment, not what it cracked open inside me. Because maybe for her, nothing cracked. Maybe that was just her truth. When the sun started setting and someone lit citronella candles, I slipped away. I walked down toward the lake under the guise of checking on the boat, though I had no idea what I was supposed to be checking. I just needed space, not from the crowd, but from the version of myself that kept smiling like everything was fine. The lake was quiet, finally, just the soft slap of water against the dock and the hum of conversation drifting down from the backyard. I sat on the edge, feet dangling over, the wood warm against my palms. That's when it hit me, that slow, awful realization you don't want to admit to yourself. I wasn't her favorite person anymore. You know what I mean? That feeling when someone's eyes used to search for you in a room, like they were waiting to share the next inside joke or check if you were okay. That electric tether between two people where you know you're each other's first instinct to celebrate, to vent, to just be. That was gone. At some point, I don't know when, she stopped turning to me first. And I think I knew. I think I'd known for a while, but I was too busy trying to hold everything together to really feel it. Eventually, someone called my name from up the hill, asking if I wanted dessert. I shouted something vague and stayed put. Later, once the cake was cut and the kids were half asleep in lawn chairs, we said our goodnights. Emily kissed her mom on the cheek and promised to help clean up in the morning. I trailed behind her, carrying the overnight bag, keys in hand. She didn't offer to drive, didn't ask how I was, just slid into the passenger seat and scrolled through her phone. Back at the motel, the same one we always stayed at when we visited her folks, with wood paneling and curtains stuck in the 90s, she collapsed onto the bed, kicked off her shoes, and turned on the TV. Some cooking show was playing, the volume low. She didn't say much, didn't comment on the day, didn't thank me for helping her dad, didn't ask why I'd been so quiet. I stood in the bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror for a long time before stepping into the shower. The water wasn't particularly hot, but I stayed under it anyway, long enough for my skin to turn red, long enough to think too much. My hands pressed against the tiled wall, and I just stood there, listening to the water rush down the drain, like maybe it could carry some of this weight with it. When I came out, towel slung over my shoulder, she was already asleep, or pretending to be. Her back was to me, one arm curled under the pillow, her breathing even, calm. I lay down beside her, not touching, not close, just occupying the same space, like strangers on a red-eye flight. I stared at the ceiling, feeling that ache you get when something you didn't want to name finally makes itself known. That cold, hollow ache that comes not from being left, but from knowing you've already been gone from someone's heart long before they tell you. I thought about all the little signs, the way she barely looked up from her phone lately, the kisses that landed more like habits than affection, how she used to reach for my hand under the table and hadn't in months. I thought about how I'd blamed stress, work, seasons of life. But maybe what I should have been blaming was the truth. We were already unraveling, and I was the only one pulling at the thread, hoping I could somehow sew it all back together. I don't know how long I lay there like that, wide awake next to the woman I used to know like a second skin. But I remember thinking something I couldn't unthink once it entered my mind. If she sees me as steady, if she sees me as reliable, then maybe she's already somewhere else, mentally, emotionally, or worse, physically. I didn't cry. Not then. Not because I wasn't devastated, but because some part of me had been grieving for weeks without even realizing it. And that night, in that cheap motel room with her inches away and miles from me, I felt lonelier than I ever had in my life. In the morning, the other side of the bed was cold. Her bag was gone, and the TV was still on, low volume, a rerun of something neither of us watched. I sat up slowly, expecting to hear the shower running or the rustle of her getting ready. But there was nothing, just that motel silence, too clean, too hollow. She'd left a note on the dresser, a yellow sticky note curling at the edges. It read, "Went to help Mom set up brunch. Didn't want to wake you. Love you." That last line, "love you," I stared at it longer than I should have. It felt out of place, like it had been added out of guilt or obligation or, worse, muscle memory. The kind of thing you write because you used to mean it, not because you still do. I set it down and got dressed slowly, like every motion required more effort than usual. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. What I felt was something worse, a kind of numbness that made the floor feel less real under my feet. Like I wasn't walking through my life, just watching it from the outside. I got in the truck and drove. Not toward the house, not toward brunch. I just drove. No music, no destination, just the open roads outside Camden, familiar stretches of highway we'd driven together dozens of times before. Back when holding her hand at a red light felt like the most natural thing in the world. Back when we'd stop at roadside diners for milkshakes and fries we didn't need. I passed those places, and they didn't even register. At some point, I turned down a street I hadn't been on in years, one of those forgotten back roads that winds through town like a secret. The trees arched overhead, dappling the pavement with sun and shadow. It was quiet, almost serene. Then I saw her car. I didn't register it at first, just a familiar shape, a silver crossover, same parking sticker in the corner of the windshield. But when I slowed down, I saw the plates, and I knew. It was parked in front of that bar she used to hate, the Rusty Anchor. She'd once said it smelled like mildew and despair. We'd laughed about it years ago when her sister had a birthday there. She'd made this face the whole night, like she couldn't believe people willingly drank there. So why was her car here? I pulled into the lot across the street, turned off the engine, and waited. Maybe she was just grabbing something for her mom. Maybe someone else was borrowing her car. Maybe I was being paranoid. Then I looked through the window, and there she was, inside, seated near the back. Just beyond the smudged glass and neon signs was Emily. And she wasn't alone. She was sitting on someone's lap, laughing, her head tilted back in that way she used to do with me when I'd whisper something silly in her ear at parties. Her hand rested lightly on his chest, his arm curled around her waist like it belonged there. They weren't hiding. They weren't cautious. They looked like they belonged together. She didn't glance at the door. She didn't look around nervously. She wasn't checking her phone or keeping distance. She looked comfortable, familiar, like this wasn't the first time, like this was part of her routine now, part of who she was now. And she looked happy. I didn't move for a long time. I just sat there in my truck, parked across the street like some cliché in a bad movie, watching the person I'd built my life around wrap herself around a stranger like he was home. I didn't go in. What would I have even said? I didn't scream or knock over bar stools or demand explanations. There was no grand moment of confrontation, no scene, no crowd, just stillness. And in that stillness, something inside me shifted, not broke, not all at once. I think it had already been breaking in quiet ways for months, maybe years. But in that moment, it finally freed itself, like something clenched had finally let go. I wasn't hers anymore, and maybe I hadn't been for a long time. I turned the key in the ignition, backed out of the lot, and drove. I don't remember where I went next. I just remember the road blurring under me, trees rushing by like they were trying to catch up with the fact that everything had changed. My hands were steady on the wheel, my mind oddly clear. I didn't cry, not right away. That came later, hours later, parked near the lake where we used to take those dumb paddle boats out, trying to see who could get to the far shore first without tipping over. I sat there, looking out at that flat stretch of water, and the tears came. Slow at first, then harder. Not sobs, not the cinematic kind, just quiet grief, that dull, throat-tightening kind that doesn't need an audience. Because I finally let myself say it out loud, to no one, she doesn't love you anymore. And maybe she hadn't for a while. Maybe she'd just been too scared to say it. Or maybe she'd been saying it in 100 quiet ways, and I was the one too scared to listen. 2 days later, we were all seated at a long table in her parents' backyard. The birthday dinner, the real one, the formal one, where everyone wore nicer clothes and made toasts and clinked wine glasses like we were all playing parts in a movie. The table stretched from the porch steps down to the garden path, lined with candles and mason jars and little handwritten name cards in cursive I couldn't read. Emily had helped set everything up that afternoon. I'd offered, but she said, "We've got it," without looking at me, her voice too bright to be real. I told myself I wouldn't come. After what I saw at the bar, I thought I'd drive home, pack my stuff, vanish. I even started the drive back to our apartment twice. But I ended up in that same empty parking lot both times, sitting behind the wheel like a man waiting for someone else to decide for him. And when I finally pulled back into her parents' driveway, I told myself it was for her mom, for respect, for closure. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe I just hadn't figured out how to walk away yet. So there I was, at one end of the table, between her Uncle David and some cousin I couldn't remember the name of, listening to people make sentimental toasts and tell stories from the good old days. Emily sat near the center of the table, shining like she always did in these settings, lit up in that way that made everyone feel lucky to be near her. She laughed easily, refilled glasses like it was muscle memory, touched her mom's shoulder every time someone mentioned how much she looked like her daughters. If I didn't know what I knew, if I hadn't seen her with my own eyes curled into another man like a secret she no longer cared to keep, I might have believed this version of her. But that version wasn't for me anymore. She didn't look my way once during dinner. Didn't reach for my hand under the table like she used to. Didn't lean in to share some side comment about the food or the playlist or her dad's third glass of wine. She existed in a world just a few feet away from mine, but out of reach entirely. I focused on the string lights overhead, trying to ignore the hum of everything I was feeling, the ache in my chest, the quiet fury, the heartbreak. All of it sat heavy in my stomach like a stone. Then it happened. I don't even remember what led into it. Some story, I think, about the time I got lost trying to find the hiking trail near their lake house years ago, the one where I ended up on private property and almost got chased by a dog. Emily laughed and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Classic. Tom's internal GPS is stuck in 2004. If you ever need to get lost for fun, he's your guy." The table laughed. Her dad chuckled. Her sisters added something about me refusing to ask for directions. Someone clinked a glass and tossed in a joke about men and maps. It was light, harmless. Or it would have been if we hadn't been us, if she hadn't just betrayed me in a way I hadn't even begun to process. I didn't laugh. I didn't even smile. I just stood slowly, calmly. I set my napkin down next to my plate, pushed my chair back, and stood up. The table quieted a little, like someone had turned the volume down by half. I didn't make eye contact with anyone, not Emily, not her parents, not her sisters. I just looked at her father and gave him a quiet, respectful nod. "Thanks for dinner," I said. And then I walked. No outburst, no scene, no cinematic monologue about betrayal and heartbreak. Just me moving through the darkened yard, past the string lights and laughter and wine-soaked summer air, toward the truck. I could feel the silence following me, questions rising behind me like steam. But no one called my name. No one stopped me, not even her. And that's when I knew whatever was left between us, it was gone, not in a flash, not in a big fiery blowout, but in a slow, quiet erosion, like waves lapping at a shoreline until there's nothing left but wet sand and a memory. I drove back to the motel in silence, no music, just the hum of the tires on the road and the blood in my ears. When I got back, I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at nothing. My hand still curled loosely around the wheel, even though the keys were in my pocket. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for, a knock, a text, a fight. But the phone stayed dark. The door stayed shut. And in that quiet, something settled over me, not peace, exactly, but clarity. I didn't want to fix it anymore. I didn't want to argue or plead or wait for her to come around. I just wanted to stop bleeding out for someone who wouldn't even notice I was hurt. After that night, something inside me clicked over. Not in a dramatic, fiery kind of way. Nothing broke, it just shut off, like a switch I hadn't realized I was holding down finally let go. I stopped reacting, not in the petty, passive-aggressive way, either. I didn't give her cold shoulders or slam cabinets or throw around silence like a weapon. It was cleaner than that, simpler. I just stopped reaching. When we got back home a few days later, I didn't ask how she was feeling. I didn't ask about the drive or her mom or what came next. I carried our bags inside, unpacked my half, and started a load of laundry without saying much of anything. She didn't notice, not right away. She was still on autopilot, filling the space with empty chatter, something about Tessa getting a new job, how the lake house bathroom still had that awful leak, how her mom wanted us to come back in August. I just nodded. The next morning, she asked me to pick up a package from the post office on my way home from work, something she'd ordered weeks ago and kept forgetting to grab. I said, no, calmly, not with spite, just, I can't today. And that was it. She paused, like she was waiting for me to follow it up with a reason, a joke, an apology, but there wasn't one. She stood there in the hallway, holding her coffee, blinking at me like she couldn't quite compute what was happening. And then she nodded, slow, confused, and walked away. It kept happening after that, little moments where she asked for things I used to do without a second thought, and I just didn't. Not out of revenge, not to make a point, but because I didn't feel like giving anymore, because somewhere along the way, I'd given everything I had, and it had gone unnoticed. So now I was keeping what was left. She started noticing. At first, it showed up in her eyes, little flickers of confusion when I didn't play along, didn't reach for her, didn't orbit her anymore. Then she got louder. She laughed more around me, that specific kind of laugh she saves for when she wants to prove something, bright and performative. She played music in the kitchen in the mornings, trying to recapture some version of us that used to dance barefoot over spilled coffee. She made dinner one night, salmon with that glaze I used to love, and I thanked her, ate it quietly, and did the dishes without a word. She posted more on social media, brighter selfies, tighter outfits, captions with song lyrics she never liked before, photos with friends, always tagged late, always from nights she said weren't that fun. At home, though, it was quiet. And in that quiet, I started doing something I hadn't in a long time. I started living. Not loudly, not dramatically, but I started carving out space for myself again. I took my book and drove out to the lake on Saturdays, not her family's lake house, but the public one down by the old train tracks. I'd sit there for hours, reading, sometimes writing, just letting the sun do its thing. I started going to the gym again, not for her, not to be more attractive or to save a marriage or whatever reason I used to have, just for me, just because moving my body felt good, because sweat felt honest. And I started sleeping better, not every night, but some. She noticed. There was a night, maybe 2 weeks after the dinner, when I caught her watching me from the bedroom doorway. I was lying on the couch, headphones in, listening to some ambient playlist, flipping through a book I wasn't really reading. She just stood there. "Are you okay?" she asked finally. I pulled out one headphone, looked at her. "Yeah," I said, "I'm fine." And I meant it. She looked like she wanted to say more, maybe ask where I'd been that day or why I hadn't come to bed or if we were okay, but she didn't. She just nodded, her arms crossed like she was cold. That's when it hit me, this was what she feared most. Not my anger, not some messy fight, but this, the silence, the stillness, the part of me that had always scrambled to make things better no longer moving. She tried harder after that. She found old playlists we used to listen to and played them while cooking. She touched my arm more when she walked past. One night, she came home with my favorite takeout from that Thai place across town and set it down with a hopeful smile, like we were on a first date again. Figured you had a long day, she said. I thanked her, ate it, was polite, but I didn't reach for her. And that's when she really understood. She hadn't lost me to another woman. There was no new face, no secret texts, no scandal. She lost me to the quiet, to the part of me she let die the day she humiliated me at that table, the part of me that used to believe we were on the same team, the part that waited for her to look at me like I mattered. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. And there's nothing more unsettling to someone who always expected you to fight for them than realizing you're not fighting anymore because you're not trying to win them back. You're trying to find yourself again. Another dinner, her family again, fewer people this time, just the inner circle, her parents, her sisters, a cousin or two. We were back at that long wooden table. She tried to act normal. I could see the effort in her smile, the stretch in her voice. She laughed too hard at a joke her dad told, poured me wine I didn't ask for, touched my arm and let her hand linger a second too long. And then, like muscle memory, she slipped. Made another joke at my expense, something about me never knowing how to dress for dinner. Everyone chuckled.